Who's your favorite sports star? Is it basketball, boxing? Is it Jordan? Is it Tyson? Think about if it's Jordan, think about what you liked about Jordan, what you just admire about him, what you think makes him the best, his killer instinct, his ability to score, his willingness to play through whatever. If it's Tyson, his power, his ability to just end the fight quickly. Now think about that person and ask yourself, who's their favorite sports star? Who inspired them? Who's Tyson's favorite boxer? Who does Tyson look at and be like, that's the guy that I admire. That's the guy that inspires me. Who does Jordan look at like, yeah, that's the GOAT? And now let's take it to historical figures. Who's your favorite historical figure? Welcome to Escaping the Echo Chamber. Today, we're talking about somebody who other figures looked up to and who inspired so many. He left such a footprint, such an imprint upon the movement. Like, he changed it. He forever morphed it into something more. Yes, I do believe he absolutely morphed into something more. He definitely left an amazing imprint on history and inspired others to get involved, and not just get involved, but how they got involved and what they strove for, what they began fighting for. That's one of the things that I find so inspirational. So inspirational. Inspirational. Okay. So inspirational about Marcus Garvey. So, to start, he was from Jamaica, and there are three things I want to discuss specifically about him, as well as just a couple of bonus points. But three main things I want to talk about. One, his ideology. One of his best known ideologies, and one that, like I said, sent ripples throughout the communities, the diaspora, was Pan-Africanism. So if you don't know what Pan-Africanism is, it's the realization that what we saw with with Africans being taken and brought by force to North America, to the West Indies, just dragged out of their homes and brought to other places, and then even the colonialism that happened on the continent of Africa. All of this gave a shared it's a shared history. It's a shared trauma that connects Africans all over the globe, black people all over the globe, and the fact that they were from the same place, but through these forced migrations, they grew geographically apart. But the idea of Pan-Africanism is that all black people, whether in the Americas, Caribbean, Africa, were connected, and that they needed to come together to deal with, to uplift themselves and in each other. Garvey's idea had so much power, Garvey's philosophy of Pan-Africanism, that later African leaders, including Kwame Nkrumah, who I've already spoken about this month, but he was one of the ones who was inspired by Marcus Garvey. And he became one of the first, the first African nation to throw off these chains of colonialism, and now to say, hey, we need to do this. We need to come together. And so he wanted African states together. He wanted to reach out to blacks in America, blacks all over, blacks all over the diaspora. And that's just one of the things about Marcus Garvey that was just like so amazing, how much he inspired people. And I think it's that in itself is a lesson in terms of if you believe in something, and if you get involved, this notion that, okay, if I get involved, I won't be able to change anything. You may not. Of course, if you don't get involved, it's almost guaranteed that you won't. But if you do get involved, the only change, it's not necessary for you to automatically create the change you want to see, and the world is remade however you wish it to be. But you can inspire people. You can actually inspire the people that make that change. And that's why it's important to get involved. Not to just sit back and say, there's nothing I can do about it. I'm just one person. One person can touch a lot of people. But there's a second point I want to talk about. There's an A and a B side. What he believed, one of the things he believed that black people needed to do was become economically empowered. He believed in black capitalism. And so he believed that black Americans, black people needed to utilize the ability of commerce to build wealth and gain power, in terms of just not being dependent on other people. Because as he would point out in his speeches, if you're dealing with somebody who hates you, how can you be dependent upon them for your survival? So he would talk about, like, why would these white Americans hate you, going to them for jobs, working for them isn't in your best interest. It will, and you will never be able to achieve any type of equality while you're in a subservient position to them. If you want to establish equality, you need to act accordingly. You need to build up, to start doing business with each other, building businesses. And he didn't just talk it, he actually started doing it. The Black Star Line was a ship line that he actually started with the design. One of the goals was to take Americans, black Americans, over to Africa and to help share culture, ideas, science. Like, he wanted them to build up Africa and to utilize the best minds to do it. I mean, it's a revolutionary idea. And he was a revolutionary person, and he actually caught the attention of people who didn't like revolutionaries. One such person who will pop up throughout the month, J. Edgar Hoover. J. Edgar Hoover saw what Marcus Garvey was doing and said, I don't like this black dude. And he probably didn't use that word, that phrase, but he wanted to stop him. He wanted to make sure that he felt Marcus Garvey was a threat, and that he couldn't have Marcus Garvey's influence being spread. He even tried to to get at Marcus Garvey through other agencies, and one of the other agencies was like, no, we don't see a violation. We don't see that he's doing anything that requires our involvement. That's just how it goes. But like I said, J. Edgar Hoover will show up again in, and it's interesting that this guy was clearly committed to stopping black people from advancing. Just a side point. The B side of that is that in being a black capitalist and believing in black capitalism, he was anti-socialist. Like, vociferously so. Very vocally, very firmly anti-socialist, anti-communist. And he was at such a point where other black groups and leaders that were, and I'll say black figures, not necessarily black leaders. I'll probably touch on that later on in the month, why I'm not calling these black leaders. But other black figures, if they were connected to socialism, if they were socialists, like, he didn't want anything to do with them. He didn't want them around his organization, the UNIA, and he was like refused to promote or allow socialism and communist philosophies to be, advanced in his organization. In fact, he would tell, he actually talked about how socialism and communism were not in black people's best interest, because he felt they were just giving the control of government over to the ignorant white masses, which would not be good for black people. He's like, they already hate you, and now you want to put the entire control of government in their hands. This is not a good idea. And that is something I find interesting, because as you look at so many other figures and black figures, black leaders, black figures or black leaders, you'll see how often Marxists, socialists, communists start popping up. I mean, if you look, just look at today. If you look, you've got a BLM movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, but you've got the organization where the founders call themselves trained Marxists. And the point, and as important as the Marxist part is, the part I find really interesting is the trained part. And that touches on why I make a distinction between black leaders and black figures. Lastly, I want to talk about his personality. Well, aspects of his personality, because he had a very big personality, very large personality. But it seemed that he had a lot of conflict with others. And like I said, if you've got genuine ideological differences, that's something significant. If you've got genuinely ideological and paths that could be an impediment to progress, so like different goals, okay, I get it. But there were several times that there were individuals who either started offshoots of the UNIA, or just were growing in influence in the UNIA, and it appears that there was hostility. So if this is a cause of ego, like I said, this is something we have to be real with. You can't just look at these historical figures, because I'm looking at how much impact he had on so many people, from Kwame Nkrumah, Martin Luther King. In fact, if you take a look at Malcolm's, the influence he had on Malcolm is that Malcolm's father was actually a Garveyite. So Malcolm was trained while his father was alive, and his brothers and sisters, they were instilled with a sense of black pride, of dignity that they would not have otherwise had it not been for Garvey, which is amazing. And it's like when you see the ripples of how one spark can light so many candles, so many lights, and so many flames. It's really an amazing thing to see. But in talking about how he had so much, there was a lot of conflict. These ego appears to have been an issue, because just because I admire him, just because he did things that were good, doesn't mean that man was without flaw. And if we don't learn if we don't recognize these flaws, we are doomed to have the same cycle repeated, and same failures repeat themselves. So when several of individuals that left his organization are assassinated, that's a problem. And to say it's a problem, that's a huge problem, because it shouldn't even be, even if he's not directly doing it, like, he needs to be putting his fist down. Like, there's no way you're going to touch if these people out there trying to lift up black people, trying to improve the conditions, the treatment, the future of black people. They may not be with me, but you don't touch them. You don't touch them. Like, anybody that touches them is getting touched. Like, that should be the message, because any movement that happens now going forward has to be about the movement, not about a person. If it's about a person, if ego is the driving factor, if this is an opportunity for somebody to say, look at me, that person is the problem. That person's in the way. That person is not somebody that should be followed. And that person's actually potential harm to the goals of improving everybody's conditions, lifting us up, together. If somebody's more concerned about, well, I must have the glory, I must be the focus of attention. And there are things that suggest that Garvey, ego was a factor in Garvey. It's interesting, though, that's sometimes the catch-22, in that's the type of person that will be able to have the presence to rise and affect so many people. But the drawback is they don't like, not being in the spotlight. But it's not impossible to find people who can motivate people, who can touch people, who can reach people and inspire them, and who aren't obsessed with, just their own power or their own glory. I think that's a critical point to realize and to look for, in terms of who do we accept as leaders. And that's the key, because leaders don't choose us. We choose the leaders. And if we're doing our job, we have to choose the right leaders. And so just a couple of other points I wanted to, like I said, there's a couple of bonus points, because he was such an interesting person. And there are things about him that, are complex, and including his relationship with the KKK and white separatist organizations. And so he had a relationship with white separatists because he was under the belief, okay, if you don't want to be with us, we don't want to be with you. That's it. Like, there's no, you must love us. Like, no, okay, cool. The one, you better not be killing us, but if you don't want to be around us, cool. We don't want to be like, there doesn't need to be any further argument from that point. If somebody doesn't want to be around you, if somebody hates you, there's no reason to push, there's no reason to try to force them to like you. And I appreciate, that's something I really appreciate about him. And it's something that, if you look right now, there's a lot of talk about stopping racism. And I'm like, controlling what another person thinks isn't really isn't my priority. Isn't a very good way to spend your energy, expend energy. And like, how will you know what you're doing? How will you know when you succeeded? And why is that your focus? Whether or not somebody else, if you choose to like me, great. We can get along, we can coincide, we can build something together, we can work together, great. If you don't, okay. You do you. I'll be over here. I'll do me. We'll be fine over here. You be fine over there. Don't come over here with no nonsense. But if it's just a matter of you just don't want to associate, that is your right. We have to be willing to accept and respect that. And it has to be, and that's what I think comes from his Marcus Garvey's self-determination, his self-respect, his dignity, that I'm not going to beg other people to love me. No, that doesn't make any sense. And so that's one of the things that I found was really interesting about him. It did rub some people the wrong way. They're like, wait a minute, why is he, meeting with segregationists? And, because he felt, hey, we have commonalities. And once again, that's an interesting lesson. If you just take a look at the past year, you've had various protests, and there are people who will tell you that the protests are completely unrelated, and those people are lying to you. I'm just saying, it's like, if we pay attention to history, we can understand the present so much clearer. As always, don't forget to give me a thumbs up, like, share, and subscribe. And I'll see you next time.